Paul Perrier. Hi, how are you doing today?
Hey Mark, good to see you again.
It's great to see you. So you've been really busy since the last time we talked. I've been following you on social media, and you've been on an incredible journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think I spoke to you the last time I spoke to you was just after I published my memoir, Cracked Wide Open. Um, and since that time, I last summer I decided to do a book tour on my bicycle that went across Canada. So I left on Canada Day, July 1st, and I left from Toronto. I biked east to St. John's, Newfoundland, the edge of the country on the east side, and then I flew to Vancouver and biked back to Toronto.
Oh wow, that's got to be a long way. Is that like that over 1,000 miles, maybe 2,000?
It's I figured it's around was 5,500 kilometers. So I'm not sure exactly how what that
Oh yeah,
translated into miles, but probably like 2,500 miles.
yeah. Sorry, yeah, forgot. Yeah. We're we're backwards with the measurements and everything.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Um,
that I had never done anything like that. I mean, I bike almost every day, but it was something I've always, I guess, sort of dreamed about doing. And then I just went, wow, this would be a great way to promote the book, but also I was trying to raise awareness and funds for mental health initiatives. So there was two parts to it, and I documented the whole trip, and I'm right now editing a film about it.
Wow. Now that's just to be clear, th this is not a motorcycle that you were riding. When you say bicycle or bike, this was a an actual you were pedaling the whole way.
I was pedaling. It was not even an e-bike. It was a regular. I bought a secondhand bike. It wasn't even an expensive bike, and it was a gravel bike, which it turned out to be the perfect bike for it. And yeah, I just naively kind of went out there going, "Oh, how hard could this be?" And it was pretty hard. I mean, there's challenges you face, but that's sort of what I wanted to experience too. It was about the challenge and about being out there. And after COVID and the lockdowns and everything, I kind of just wanted to get out there and see what the state of Canada was like, and in terms of addiction and homelessness, which since I made the film, my book was a sort of based around the film I made 20 years ago about drug addiction, and yeah, my sense is things are getting worse since that time.
Yeah. Well, so as you were biking along, I mean, there's so many questions. What did you eat? Where did you sleep? Shower, bathroom. I'm just can't even imagine. I'm always thinking when I travel of like, in a car, what hotel am I going to stop at? And you're just here. You're on a bicycle. Did you have to plan ahead for everything?
Well, I guess ideally you do, but I didn't have the time to. I just went, and so I had two bags on my bike and a pannier in the back, a little box, and so everything was on my bike. I would go out. And I had a one-man tent, a sleeping bag, so I camped quite a bit,
Yeah.
just for expenses and stuff. But it was also Canada in the summer is so beautiful, and there's so many
Oh yeah.
beautiful campsites. That was a huge bonus. But I also, when I had to, I would stay in a motel or uh, whatever, just where I didn't know where I would end up at the end of every day. So
Yeah.
it was completely yeah, I'd wake up, I'd look at the map, or I'd do it the night before and go, okay, well, I'll try to get to here. And, you know, I was probably
Yeah.
doing about 100 kilometers a day to 140 kilometers a day.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So what about tell us about your interactions with homelessness and addiction along the way? Like who did you encounter and what kinds of things did you learn about them?
Well, so yeah, as I'm riding along, I'd meet people and they'd obviously ask me, oh, what are you doing? And I'd tell them and they'd go, wow, that's pretty amazing, and then they'd start talking and people just came up to me and, it was former addicts, homeless people, and they would just tell me their stories. So I didn't, I didn't, as my film Crack Not Broken wasn't planned, and most of my documentary work isn't planned because I believe that's how you really get a good documentary. It was just haphazard who I would run into. Um, but so what I'm trying to show in this film, there's a few things. I mean, it's a journey about a trip and about crossing a country. The beauty of Canada in the summer is jaw dropping, and but it's interspersed with these, and I wouldn't say it's all dark, but people who've experienced addiction and people who are experiencing homelessness, and so you have these beautiful visuals and then these kind of stark stories that lay underneath everything, as addiction does or homelessness does. So what I captured, I'm in the middle of editing it right now, but I believe I was led to the right places. These people were met. I was meant to meet these people, kind of like my film, like Crack Not Broken. I always believed that just didn't just happen, that it was two forces that came together in a room for 45 minutes and created this pretty incredible story about one person's experience with addiction, but that is relatable to anybody who has either gone through it themselves or their family has. And that, addiction now, it's not just drug addiction. There's the addiction to technology. There's the addiction. You can be addicted to anything, but every but drug addiction. What I really saw. So there's an interesting part to it. And it sort of is playing out in the film is when I set out on this, I was just trying to make it. Like I didn't know if I'd make it the whole way. I'm 64 years old, and I'm in well, I'm in much better shape now that I did it,
Mm.
but I was in pretty good shape. Um, but I was just, the first from Toronto to, I would say, New Brunswick. I was just trying to figure everything out. So I wasn't really thinking about anything other than surviving. But then once I got into it, I kind of got into this groove and I was shooting each day. I shot everything on my iPhone. And I had an iPhone and a 360-degree camera. But most of the stuff is shot on the iPhone. And at the end of the days, I'd look at the footage going, oh my God, this is like, it's incredible. And then I started getting into the whole mindset of making a film about it. And everything just sort of played out, better than I ever could have expected.
Yeah. Oh wow. Well, that's so and I can imagine Canada in the summer. It really must be really beautiful. I haven't really I was briefly in Canada as part of a few years ago as part of an Alaskan cruise, and I think we stopped in Victoria to go to the I think it's called the Bouchard Gardens, which of course is incredibly beautiful,
Yeah.
and I think and we went on some kind of mountainous train ride in part of Alaska, which is I mean, I know it's like not technically not Canada, but it's all that same region, and it really is just like hills all covered in trees, and it just looks untouched and just really beautiful. So there must be some incredible footage.
Yeah, yeah. And I've been across Canada, I've gone to Vancouver and Edmonton. Like I've been to the major cities, but I never really went across Canada. Like this is real was really you go into each province and they're very different, right? Like you have French Quebec, like well, English Ontario, then you're in French Quebec, and then you're in sort of French and English New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And then I'd never been to Newfoundland, which is this rock off the coast of Canada. And so it was such an enlightening thing for me to see Canada that way and the beauty of Canada and the people, especially doing what I was doing. Like when you're biking, people recognize that you're going through something and they were so helpful, and people would welcome me into their homes and put me up occasionally, and it was just such a cool experience.
Just to get an idea of like where like were you about like through most of the trip, were about how far north were you of the U.S. Canada border?
Pretty close to the border most of the time.
Yeah.
It's from Vancouver to Winnipeg, it's a couple hundred miles from the border. And then,
Was it like one highway that you like took most of the way?
yeah, the Trans Canada Highway. I mean, you, I would do both. Like, I was a little nervous riding the highway at first. So I did more back roads, but the back roads are hard. You have hills and stuff. The highway, you have these semi trucks passing you by at about 120 kilometers an hour, and they're a foot away from you. But that breeze that they actually pushes you forward. So, and there's less hills and stuff. So I got pretty good at riding the highways, and after a while, didn't have much fear. I mean, anything could have happened, but I just, trusted that I was going to be safe.
Yeah. Were there any stories like who stands out the most in your memory of people that you met along the way and the stories that you heard along the way?
Well, it was sort of in when I got to Newfoundland that I really got into the addiction homelessness side of it. Up to that point, I really hadn't run into that many people, and that was just before I flew west. So I ended up there, and I had to take a flight to Vancouver. And Vancouver, as you've been to briefly, is such a beautiful city. Like it's one of the most beautiful cities I've been to. And I captured all that, but there's a street called Hastings Street, which is one of the most unbelievable streets. Like it's just about a mile from the center of town, but it is 3 blocks of people living on the street. It's I've never seen anything like it. And the one thing I started to notice from the West Coast, which I've had experience. I've been around drugs have been sort of a theme in my work for the past 20 years. So I've seen lots of drug use and stuff, but I had never seen fentanyl in action, where that sort of became when I started coming west, I would see more and more people on fentanyl, which is you see them just bent over. I don't know what that drug is all about, but that was the big change to me. Something
Yeah.
I'd never seen before, and something that's killing so many people. And that's that was a big change to me. And then, yeah, just I met people like I'm in, and part of what I'm using in the film is I'd meet like this. I met this guy in Newfoundland who was a street musician, and he had this great song about addiction, which I'm using in the film. And he sang it live, and I'm using the live footage from it. I met other musicians whose music I'm using, um, and yeah, just the state of homelessness is terrible in Canada, as I'm sure it is in the States and everywhere
Yeah,
now. I mean, there's just been such a huge change in the last, I don't know, well, I'm using 20-year period that goes back to when I made my film. But yeah, so Hastings Street in Vancouver was kind of mind blowing and sobering in many ways. And so, and then, the people in one section, I was going along in Saskatchewan, the prairies in Canada, which I had come through the Rockies, which is climbing these crazy hills. And then once you get out of the Rockies, it's the prairies, which is flat, flat, flat for as far, like straight and flat, which I loved. Like it was beautiful, but when the wind blows against you, like it's like riding against a wall. And one day this guy just stopped his van. He had his, like, it was almost like a tour bus, and he just pulled over and he goes, "Get in." And I got in. Like that was part of my thing. Like if anybody told me to go somewhere, I would, if I possible, I would go there. Or if anybody said come with me, I would go if I felt safe. And I always felt pretty safe. Anyways, he picked me up, and he had a, interesting. So we were going to Regina, and so he ended up giving me a lift for about 2 hours, which is about a day's riding. So that saved me a day's riding, and it would have been way more than that with the wind. But he had this interesting story, and he led me to a place in Regina. So there were all these connections that just led me.
yeah,
And I was also lucky. So I was on the road. It took me 66 days to complete the bike ride, and out of those days, I think I had one day of rain, and I had one flat tire. And I don't
oh
know
wow,
how to change flat tires, so that was a blessing. But yeah, just everything went so well, and I just, I believe I was meant to make this movie, and it's a companion piece to my book, and it's a standalone piece. But I think it'll raise more awareness about addiction and homelessness. And I plan on touring with the film and my book in 2025, because connecting with people like that is really, I don't know, I just think that's what I'm meant to do.
yeah, yeah. In fact, uh, I believe that the title, or maybe the working title, is "My Own Private Pilgrimage," and I think of pilgrimage as being, like a religious journey, like a spiritual journey. Not maybe not religious, but spiritual. And so did you feel that this was a spiritual journey for you?
It was a totally spiritual journey, and not getting religious. I mean, but I believe I'm a Catholic. I was brought up as a Catholic. I was an altar boy when I was a kid. I believe in God, a God. And I believe that, as a photographer, um, and filmmaker, I rely on light to make beautiful pictures and beautiful videos. And God is represented by light in the Bible, and I believe God was leading me, and you'll see it in this film. It is, yeah, it was a pilgrimage, and a pilgrimage is a real pilgrimage is you go out there searching for something, not really sure what it is, but that you're led somewhere. And I really believe I was led by whatever God is. But, everybody has a different do or don't have a relationship with God, and that's fine. I don't care. But this is, I believe in fact, I don't want to give away too much of my film, but some of the things I photographed uh, are very, I believe I photographed my guardian angel. I believe I had a guardian angel, and I believe I photographed God in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I know where I live, if you look at the night sky, you almost can't see any stars where I live because there's just so much light. Like, did you have any times when you were out laying under the stars and just seeing the entire galaxy?
Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, almost so my day, I probably spent about 8 to 9 hours a day on the bike. Okay. I'd get up pretty early because riding is easier. There's less wind in the morning, and I wanted to get going anyways. Um, but then at the end of these, there were always pretty hard days, no matter what. I'd end up at these beautiful locations. And yeah, there was sometimes I'd just sit out under the stars, just sitting there going, wow, I can't believe I'm here. And I can't believe I don't know where I'm going tomorrow, but it'll probably be as good, well, as good as this, or maybe even better. And there was one day where I got in New Brunswick where I took this old logging road by mistake. I was just led there by my Google Maps. And I didn't know how far it went along, but I either had to go on that or go back 20 kilometers and take another road. I was going, okay, I'm not going backwards. So I decided to take this logging road, and I got like lost. I was in the middle of nowhere and like hadn't seen a car for hours. And this road was like, it was just potholes and rocks, and how my bike made it through there without a flat tire was a bit of a miracle there. Because if I had a flat tire there, like I said, I wouldn't have known how to fix it. And I would have been in the, like, they were just nowhere. I finally, after hours, ran into three hunters on ATVs who looked at me like, what the fuck are you doing here on that? And I go, I'm lost. Can I, I'm trying to get to Miramichi, New Brunswick. And they go, I go, can I get there from here? And they go, yeah, you've got another 20 kilometers. So, but I made it. And yeah, it was just this kind of, it was just an experience about going out and trying something that, people have done a lot harder things than I've done. But riding across the second biggest country in the world it's a pretty big accomplishment for me anyways.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Did Was it hard to get away from like your regular everyday life? Were there like people or responsibilities or things that you had to kind of work around, or was was that like I'm thinking like for like maybe anybody out there who's thinking maybe I should go on a pilgrimage, and I know for me it's like if I told my family I'm going to be away for months at a time or whatever, they'd say like, well, forget it, or at least be near a phone or signal or whatever. But yeah, how did that work out, being able to get away for so long?
Well, so I've been living in Toronto for 30 years. I'm from Montreal. I moved to Toronto to pursue photography, and it evolved into filmmaking. So the one thing about Toronto, which has changed in that time period is uh, Toronto's a great city, but it's a tough city for an artist to live in. Like, especially now, everything's so expensive and stuff. So I sort of wanted to make a change, and I'm not sure Toronto is a place where I want to spend the next part of my life. Like, I spent my career there. So I wanted to make a change. So that was one part of it. The other part is, I'm divorced. So I have two daughters that live in Toronto, but they're on their own now. So, you know, I just told them what I was doing. That was the biggest tie I had, but
Yeah.
they're on their own now. So, when my parents were, when our when I grew up and we were all on our own, my parents moved to Europe, and I still had a relationship with my parents, whether they were beside me or not. Um, so yeah, it was something I wanted to do. Like right now, I've spent the last 6 weeks. I'm in Kelowna, BC. That's where I'm editing the film. So I'm just, that's all I'm doing right now. I want to get it finished as quickly as possible and out there as quickly as possible, and continue sort of what I'm doing. Like, I don't think I'm finished with that. I mean, the bike part's finished. I'm not going to bike across Canada again, but I want to take this film and let people experience, because how I shot most of it on my bike. It's all motion. I obviously watched a few films about people who have done big bike trips, and they're always interesting because you're seeing people taking risks and capturing beautiful stuff. But I want it, when people see my film, you'll really experience, well, you'll see things the way I saw them, and it's all motion. And I watched it on a big screen TV, but I think in a movie theater on a huge screen, it'll be like, I think you might have to take gravel before you watch my film.
Well, that's so that's how many you must have hours and hours. Like how much time of footage do you have to go through to edit?
Um, so I don't know exactly, but probably 5 or 6 hours of decent footage.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, as I went along, like I said, that first part of the trip, I wasn't really shooting that much. But then as I went along, I started shooting these longer scenes, like on the highway, and you really feel trucks passing you by, and you really feel the loneliness of like that part that I got lost on. I shot too. So I started shooting. Uh, I just started shooting it more cinematically once I got into it. So it's all. I mean, editing is a really interesting process. It's very until you again get the flow of it. It's hard to see it, but I'm more than halfway through it now, and it's all like the pieces going. Okay, this goes here, this goes here. There's a bit of cheating you can do too, but it's just good. I'm really I believe everything I grew up doing, like photography, filmmaking, cycling. Those are like three of my passions in life. They all sort of came together for this piece, and it's going to be a very unique documentary. It's not going to be your typical documentary. You're going to experience what it's like to do something like that, and then experience, what some people in Canada are fighting through.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with the addiction, people you came across with addiction issues, was it all fentanyl, like no crack or meth, or is it pretty much fentanyl across the board everywhere?
Um, well, that's hard to say. I mean, because
Yeah.
a lot of stuff like I just like I would go. I wasn't. I was staying in like uh, I shouldn't say the bad side of town, but just because of my budget, I was staying in cheaper places, right? So which are nearer to those areas of town. So I would always go there and just document it. It wasn't like I was always interviewing people. It was people who was coming up, people who came up to me that I would interview. So I'm not exactly sure what everybody was on or not, but the
Yeah.
fentanyl for sure you begin to see because especially from the West Coast, you just see people bent over, just
Yeah.
standing there, bent over, holding their backs and not being able to move and whatever
Yeah.
that you probably know more than like I'm still not sure what that drug is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think fentanyl is pretty much dominating the drug scene out there as far as what people are doing. I mean, there's been periods maybe like in the 80s where crack was like the big drug and amongst the homeless population. And I know here in Fort Lauderdale, there was a tent city, by the main bus terminal. It was a huge parking lot. I don't know how that worked out, if that was given to them or something, and which they eventually took away later on. But yeah, it was just like this huge parking lot of tents everywhere, and from people that I had come across and talked to that I know that there was a lot of crack use, and that's where people would go to live there and get their drugs and interact with each other and whatever they did there. But yeah, crack is not and cocaine are not nearly as deadly as opioids can be, and especially fentanyl, especially unregulated fentanyl in the streets where you have no idea what the potency is. It's pretty much worse than anything because you don't know if you might be getting the same thing all the time, and then one day you get something that's 10 or 100 times stronger.
Uh, well, no, I just heard of my friend of my brother's, a friend of his son just died from fentanyl. It's like, what?
Yeah,
Yeah, that guy who picked me up in the van, in the tour bus, literally was a tour bus. Um, he said something to me. He goes, he was talking about fentanyl and he goes it's not like heroin, which is a much smoother. He was just explaining it and I'm thinking, wow, you like heroin used to be that drug that's a wow, that's got to be the worst drug, but fentanyl has upstaged that by a long margin right now and it is a killer.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, heroin is 4 times the potency of morphine, and when a person takes heroin, it turns into morphine in their system. So it's essentially a form of morphine, and fentanyl is synthetic, and it's 80 to 100 times more potent than morphine. And that in a medical context, that's they use it all the time in surgery, and it's used safely, um, under supervised medical conditions, all the time. But when it's on the streets and you have no idea what you're getting or the potency of it, and it's that potent, it's much more dangerous than heroin, and probably more dangerous than any street drug that's ever been out there.
Yeah, yeah. And what is it used for in surgery?
For pain management, it's
Okay.
very, yeah, it's part of general anesthesia. You
Okay.
give a potent muscle relaxer, and the muscle relaxer will paralyze the diaphragm so the person can't breathe, so they're on a ventilator. So the issue of you know not being of the respiratory depression is not a problem during surgery because they're breathing for you, and they give other things to put you in a state of general anesthesia. But fentanyl is often used and is a important component of surgery.
Okay.
And yeah, they use it all the time. But when you get it at one time from an anesthesiologist and they know precisely how much they're giving you,
Yeah.
and even though it's potent, they measure it in micrograms. They don't and it's diluted appropriately. So, they don't have to worry about, accidentally giving you too much. They know exactly how much they're giving, and it's very controlled. And fentanyl, also a unique thing about it is it builds up in the fat cells over time when a person uses it a lot. So someone who gets it, once in a lifetime or a couple of times for surgeries is different from someone that takes it every day, multiple times a day for
Yeah.
periods of weeks, months, or years. And so that makes it really difficult to get off of because to start a medication like Suboxone, it has to be out of your system for a period of time. And an opioid like oxycodone or heroin or morphine, they get out of your system pretty quickly, but fentanyl lingers. And so it interacts with the Suboxone and, people go into what's called precipitated withdrawal, which is difficult. And it makes the transition into treatment a little bit more difficult. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of solutions. I think in some areas of Canada, they're a little bit more progressive and have some better ways of dealing with it than here, because we're kind of a little bit more limited. But it's it's a difficult issue, and they've tried to make medical treatment more available. Things like Suboxone, they've opened up a little bit here more now. They don't require doctors to do the same training. Actually, they do.
Right.
They require every doctor to do the 8 hours of training rather than just the doctors that choose to. And that way they're hoping more doctors will take it on, the job of helping people get off of opioids. But yeah, it's a major issue, and they don't talk about it as much anymore in the news, but it's still, I think, as bad as ever.
Yeah. Well, for sure. That from what I saw, yeah, I mean, from what I saw, it looks like Night of the Living Dead when people
Yeah,
are on it. It's straight out of a horror movie.
yeah. I think in some places in Canada they're making prescription opioids more available, where at least the person is taking something that's a known quantity. Like there was a story a few years ago about Dilaudid dispensing machines where a person could, and it wasn't like you put in $1 and get your Dilaudid. It was like a biometrically activated thing, and you had to be authorized to use it. But a person could go up to it and whatever, use their hand, fingerprint, or eye.
Yeah.
I think they actually used an eye scan thing, and get their Dilaudid dispensed, and at least now you know exactly how many milligrams you're getting rather than an unknown.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's not prevention, but it's at least safety,
Yeah, harm reduction, makes
harm reduction.
it, yeah, and which goes a long way, hopefully keeping a lot of people alive and safe. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the answers are. Like that's, I believe my purpose is to just expose it and show people what it what it looks like and what the reality is. And yeah, I don't know what the solutions are to fentanyl or drug addiction. I mean, there's so many things that go into mental health and good mental health. And part of it, part of what I was doing this whole big trip was, I believe there's so many components to be mentally healthy, and part of it's physical, part of it's spiritual, part of it's working on your brain. And it's not just one thing. Like you can't just go to the gym every day and you're going to be,
mm,
it's good for you, but there's a whole bunch of components that go into being healthy and whatever happy is.
yeah, yeah, it's so I would imagine like when someone goes to watch your film, that one person might watch it to see, your interactions with people, and then somebody else might want to see like what is it like to bike across Canada. So you imagine it has something in there for a lot of people to enjoy.
Well, yeah, that's what I think why it'll touch a lot of people and expose the people who aren't exposed to addiction and homelessness. Although you're exposed to it wherever you live now. That's sort of,
Yeah,
but I've captured it in a way that it's not pushing anything on anybody. It's just here's what I experienced. I went out sort of with this idea in mind to, my book, which is about addiction and mental health. Um, that sort of led to this, and will expose people to it in various ways that will be both entertaining and educational, I hope.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
also, I've been at first I was just editing footage, and now I came across somebody who's supplying me with music, and I'm putting music under it now, and it's like, whoa, this is a cool trip.
Yeah. Oh. You mentioned a 360 camera, and that's intriguing because I have one somewhere. I don't know, it's not a good one. It's a low. I have a low quality one, but years ago, maybe I think maybe 2017, we were in San Francisco, and I was using it all over the place, and I made a video of us. We went on this old-fashioned trolley ride, up a hill. I guess I forgot where it was, but it was one of the famous ones that everybody has to go to. Like you go at the bottom of the hill and wait in this long line, and the thing is circling at the end of the line, and then you get on, and it takes you up the hill. And I held the 360 camera. I didn't even do it right. I didn't have the pole to put it on, so you can see my thumb in the bottom of the video the whole way. But I published that one to YouTube to save it because I don't know where all my other videos from that camera are. But if you go on YouTube, you can spin around and look at it from any angle. You can see the people on the train car or the trolley with us, or you can look out at the street and watch the buildings go by. And if you put a VR headset on, you can. I think even on YouTube, you can just look around and as if you're actually there. Uh,
Wow, yeah,
so
yeah.
so that's. I mean, did you get a lot of that 360 footage?
Yeah, so I bought it's an Insta 360 camera. I never used it before. Like I never even tested it out before I went on the road. And like you said, mine has that pole, the invisible pole. Um,
Yeah,
so so I would mount it. I had a mount for my bike, and I don't overuse it because you can do a whole bunch of really cool things with it. But it looks like a drone.
yeah,
You put it up 6 feet, but that wide angle makes it look like it's flying over you. So it just gives a really cool perspective in certain shots, and yeah, and it was light. Like it was this big. The camera's this big, and so all I was carrying was my iPhone and that camera. I was originally thinking, oh, I'll bring my good 35 millimeter camera to take beautiful pictures, but thank God I didn't. Literally, thank God. Just because of the weight and the time it takes to, like, no matter what, you have to set up. Whereas with my iPhone, I had it in my back pocket or on a clip on my bike, and I just grab it, flip it on, and start shooting. And what I managed to capture is on a instrument like this, the was just incredible. Like years ago, you wouldn't have been able to do that. So I think technology was at the right point for me to do this trip too. Like the timing on everything was perfect.
yeah. Yeah, the iPhones capture great pictures and video. I think when I was on that trip to Alaska and Canada, I had the only camera I had with me was an old iPhone, like a five. What do they call it? The SE, I think. Yeah, the 5 SE, like which is by today's standards is ancient, and
Yeah,
um and the quality during the day that going through the mountains and everything and on the water and through the gardens. I mean, it's great, incredible quality. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's I mean, it captures everything really. I mean, it does look good. And
right.
you probably had a much more recent one on this trip.
Well, so I had the 14.
Yeah.
So it was a few generations from that one. But the difference, like I'm literally hand holding. So I'm riding one hand holding the cat, like I'm not even looking most of the time when I'm shooting. And that's what's really
Yeah,
incredible about my footage, because I look at it, go, man, if I was a drone operator, it would look this good. But I would just take my
yeah,
camera, position it, and then ride, and then do a pan and
yeah.
stuff. But the stabilization, it's
Oh,
incredible.
yeah.
Like, because there's so much movement going on, and yet it's this it just flows the whole way. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
this camera is, and it's not even the latest one. Like, it's
That's
got,
yeah. That's what my kids have, the 14. I have the 12 because I have no reason to upgrade yet. But the kids have the 14, and yeah, the quality of video and pictures is incredible. I think it's as good as anything. So, and I think even Apple, they've shot commercials and people have shot full movies on those on even older ones. So
yeah, yeah.
that's perfect camera to bring with you.
It was the perfect camera. Yeah, yeah. And that's an interesting part of the film too, that it's shot, and part of it's added. I've edited part of it on the camera too, like just using iMovie.
Yeah,
So it's a real, like, Crack Not Broken, which cost me $45 to make. This one's more expensive, but it's like the real costs were only a couple of $1,000, and
yeah,
it's going to look and sound. I mean, it doesn't all look and sound great, because um, I didn't use a proper microphone either. Like, when I was talking to people, I was just up close with them. So there are, like, I remember this homeless guy I interviewed in St. John's at it's called Signal Hill, and it's the east. It's not the easternmost part of Canada. There's one place 20 miles down that's a bit more east, but it's the edge of Canada on the Atlantic side of the ocean, and it is windy up there. So you hear some wind during the conversation, but that's sort of how it sounded anyway. So I go, you're hearing what I heard too. So it's kind of like Crack Not Broken wasn't a beautiful looking film because it was shot with a cheap camera and no lights and no microphone, but that added to it too, right? Like, it's just what I captured is real. Like,
yeah,
nothing was planned. That's the interesting thing about my film. Like most documentaries, they go, okay, well, you have to interview this person, go here, go here, go here. This is no, no, no. I'm just gonna go and
yeah,
capture whatever, and then make something out of it. So, you know, there could be more in-depth interviews for sure, but you really capture, there's one kid where I was getting my bike. I had twice when I flew from St. John's to Vancouver, I had to box up my bike to transport it. And then I took a bus from Winnipeg to Sudbury, Ontario, because to get from Winnipeg to Sudbury, you go through northern Ontario, which is just barren land, and it would have taken me a week to do. And at that point, I went, and people had warned me, going like, it's really dangerous. There's tons of bears, blah blah blah. And I just went, okay, I'm not gonna. I don't have to cover every kilometer of Canada. So I took a bus from Winnipeg to Sudbury. So I had to get my bike boxed up at a bike shop in Winnipeg. And one of the kids who was boxing my bike, asked me what I was doing. I told him, and then he just told me the story about how he had recently undergone oral surgery for, I don't know, a crown or something. He was prescribed Tylenol threes to deal with the pain. And he just told me the story about how after the pain went away, he kept taking the Tylenol threes, because he goes, I feel I kind of like the drowsiness. And anyways, it was just this story about how he realized he was becoming addicted to something and how he stopped it. And, it's not a huge, terrible drug story, but it's this young kid who's was aware that he was becoming, it could have gone like, that's how you can go into addiction, right? Like if you just go, oh, this feels good, so it must be good. And then the Tylenol threes wear off and you go, okay, well, I need something else to get that feeling. And, sometimes like things can lead to more potent drugs that I guess can go up to fentanyl. But it was just this kind of cool story about this young, I think he was like 22 years old. And it's just as another story that it's in the film.
Yeah. Did you feel that the trip was therapeutic for you, like with your own life of being able to just get away and get away from regular everyday life? I mean, I don't know if maybe in dealings with people you see every day or with your ex-wife or with anything else going on, like did you feel it was therapeutic to just pull yourself out of your regular life and just be out there far away?
Yeah, man. It was well, I say I needed a change. Like at the beginning of the film, I go, I needed to get out of Toronto because I hadn't made a film since Crack Not Broken due to a bunch of circumstances. And in a way, it's something I've always dreamed of doing. When I think you read my book, right?
Yeah.
I talk in the book. In my book's a memoir about being an artist, and leading me to Crack Not Broken. But I talk about when I was 7 years old, our family moved to Montreal. Well, we lived in Montreal, but we moved to Westmount in Montreal, which is downtown Montreal. And it was the summer of 1967, which was Expo 67 was hosted. The World's Fair was in Montreal that summer. And I was 7 years old, and I went to Expo a few times that summer. And I talk about it in the book. I went to see a film called Canada 67, and it was shot by what ended up being the people who ended up doing IMAX, but they went across Canada with, I think, 13 cameras, and they shot Canada not just in the air, but a lot of it was in the air. Some of it was on the ground using 13 cameras. And they projected it in this theater that the screens surrounded you. And I remember so that was the first documentary I remember seeing. And like, it was, talk about an experience of going, like, you're as if you're like, there's a scene that goes over Niagara Falls and like people were just holding on to rail. So that was a really profound experience for me. And the irony that 50 years or how many years later, I make a film about going across Canada using modern technology, which it fits in, they must have spent millions back then. Now you can do it with what you have every day. But I believe my film is as well, it's probably a more beautiful film than even that one is in a different
Yeah.
way. But it's this, you look, for me, writing the book and doing this trip, it really ties everything in your life is tied. Every experience you have in your life is tied together, right? And that experience about writing the book was hard. It took me 10 years to do because I'm not a writer, but I I like doing things that are seem hard to do or push you. So leaving Toronto was hard. I've been there 33 years. I still have some family there. I have friends there. But for me, I'm like, I would have regretted not doing it, I think, if I didn't do it. Now there's so many more opportunities to, I want to keep traveling, and not just in Canada. I believe this film can, people in the States will understand my film. People anywhere will understand the film because it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I believe you have a thing going on where people can get involved. A GoFundMe page. What's the best way to find that? I think I typed something in Google and it came right up. I typed your name, Paul Perrier, and another word, I think. But what's the best way to go straight to that?
Yeah, so I started a GoFundMe campaign to try to offset some of the costs, and part of what you know, part of the reason I do this, like I did with my book, is when my book was published, all the people who helped me, put whatever amount of money in, their names were in the book, which it's kind of a cool thing. Like that's kind of, the book will last long after I'm gone, long after all the people who put the money in. It's sort of, um, you're leaving. You're part of something that's part of something bigger, I believe. And that's sort of what I'm doing with the film. If people, want to have their names associated with it, and it is, a good cause. It's about awareness, but you put some money in, and in the credits, your name will be there, and you're part of this film, which who knows where it'll go. I
Yeah,
I want to. The first thing I want to do is just tour with it, so when people see the film, I'm there. You show the film. There's a Q&A after, and sell books or whatever. But more an experience other than just releasing my film on a streaming thing. I want to do sort of what I did with my bike tour. So it's the GoFundMe is yeah. I guess you go to GoFundMe and just put in my own private pilgrimage. It'll come up, and yeah,
yeah,
if you want to be part of that, that's cool, and it helps. It'll help me with the expenses that you know editing and preparing for the next part of this. Yeah, that's part of an interesting part of how filmmakers and artists get money now, because getting money for especially documentaries, and especially when it doesn't fit into the mainstream, which this won't, um, that's, you've got to rely on people who understand, or uh, yeah, understand what you're doing.
yeah. And for people listening who are wondering how far this film might go and where it might go to, your last film went to Oprah, so it got a lot of recognition, and it was got a very wide audience and a lot of attention.
Well, it not only did it go to Oprah, which was an interesting part of it, which was, of course, I never thought it would go that far, but getting to Oprah was what got it to HBO. And then
Oh yeah,
HBO
HBO.
bought my film for their addiction series. So Crack Not Broken was one of four independent films that became a part of this groundbreaking series in 2007. So yeah, like, again, to me, when I made that, or when I went to shoot that interview, which was never planned as a film, um, and you put it out there, you never know where it's going to go. And I think I didn't. Well, I had a feeling about Crack Not Broken that it was going to do something. There's something about that film that is so unbelievable. Just even though it's just two people in a room talking, it's there's stuff that happens, much like on my trip, that were like the phone calls and the timing of everything, the timing that I got to that place, the timing when I left. There was just, when I looked at it afterwards, I went, there's a film here. Like, I barely have to do anything. And when I pitched the film, that was the problem, that people were like, people were saying, no, it's part of a film. Like you've got to bring in other like professionals, interview this. I'm going, no, that's not what my film's about. My film is about just two people talking in a room about, well, one person mostly talking in a room. I'm capturing most of it, but it's just about one person's experience, that will hopefully, other people can relate to. So yeah, the film I'm working on now isn't finished, but I have a really good feeling that it's going to go. I don't know where it's going to go, but it'll take on a life of its own for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be great. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait till you finish it. It sounds really, really incredible. So,
You've
yeah,
seen
Paul.
the trailer, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, and yeah, that's yeah, definitely.
And that sort of, that gives a little feeling of it, but it, and I originally thought this would be like a short documentary, like 45 minutes, or thought it would be around the same timing as Crack Not Broken, but it's going to be a full 45-minute feature film, because to cover that area, you just can't cut stuff down too much. So
Yeah,
it's going to be getting through the film will be a bit like getting through biking across Canada.
yeah, and it was great to be able to follow you as you were out there. You posted on Instagram regularly. That was really great to be able to see your progress as you went along.
Yeah, that was a cool part of it too.
Yeah. So, yeah, Paul Perrier, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Mark. Great to talk to you again. And let's keep in touch and see where this all goes.